There's been a bit of slippage in the schedule, but we are going to go on to our next session, a very important one, if not a matter of life and death. It is our first panel session, and it's the Paddock to pilot aviation safety in the pastoral industry. Now, I don't need to tell any of you that aviation plays a critical role in pastoral operations, but it comes with significant safety challenges. This session will explore the evolving landscape of aviation safety and its impact on the industry. Facilitating this discussion is Des Carey, who brings extensive experience in aviation and safety practices to the table. Please welcome Des. And welcome his other panellists, Craig Peterson from the Civil Aviation Safety Authority, Angus Mitchell, Chief Commissioner of the Australian Transport Safety Bureau, and Felicity Richards from FarmSafe. Make them all welcome, everyone.
Take one. Rightio. I doubt that I'm going to be the first responder. All right. Okay. Are we just taking a seat? Awesome.
Morning everyone. Welcome to today's panel session on aviation safety in the northern pastoral industry. Aviation plays a crucial role in our day-to-day operations, including mustering, property management and emergency response across our vast remote landscapes. There also comes with significant risks. This discussion will explore how we can improve safety and ensure a strong future for our pastoral aviation. To begin, we take a moment to honour those who have lost their lives in aviation incidents in the pastoral industry. The loss of even one life is unacceptable, and everyone has a right to return home safely after a day's work. This panel has emerged from a collective need to make sure no more lives are lost unnecessarily. We are grateful to have a distinguished panel of experts here today to help us with this conversation. As we were introduced before, first introduce our panellists: Craig Peterson, Aviation Safety Advisor for CASA; Angus Mitchell, the Chief Commissioner for ATSB; and Felicity Richards, Chair of FarmSafe. Welcome. I'm Des Carey, Executive on the NTCA, fellow pastorist, helicopter pilot, and I'll be facilitating today's discussion. So let's get started. Angus, first question for you. Let's start. What are the most common aviation risks or incidents we encounter in northern pastoral operations, and what lessons have we learned from the past incidents that could help prevent future accidents?
Yeah, no, thanks, Kristen. Look, I guess if I put it into two separate categories, one of them is around capability of pilots and machines in the conditions that they operate. So we constantly see repeatable accidents with what we would say visual into instrument conditions, so flying to the conditions, and that includes that, I guess, that concept around loss of spatial orientation. It happens very quickly. The same thing happens after last light as well, and we've got a couple of instances here in the Northern Territory in the last 2 years. When pilots go into conditions that they're either not trained for, not equipped for in their helicopters or light planes for that matter, that spatial disorientation happens very quickly. Now, the research would say within 90 seconds. Most of the incidents that we see, it's probably within the first 30 seconds. It's a bit like driving down the freeway at night in the dark and turning off your headlights, and at 110 k's, how long do you think you can stay on the road? In the air, you've got three dimensions, so you've got pitch, roll, and you've got altitude. That happens quickly. It's generally fatal when that occurs. The other one is around maintenance. So whilst helicopters are an important part of the machinery that's used, mustering, shooting, spraying, much the same as all the other machinery, the margins for error when you operate at a low altitude, which is often done, and at high power rates, which is often done as well, the margins of error are so small. So, and the chance of recovery, where you may not maintain, whether it be for other farm machinery, tractors, four-wheel drives, the outcome generally isn't fatal. Where that happens in a helicopter, if you don't maintain that and your fuel and all of those sorts of prerequisites, yes, you have, I guess there's CASA guidance, there's manufacturer's guidance. If you don't follow that, when it goes wrong very quickly, and generally the outcome is catastrophic. So they're the things that we see constantly, and I've got perhaps a dozen of those on my books at the moment.
Thank you, Angus. Now, moving on to you, Felicity. What steps can we take as an industry to improve aviation safety on our stations? And what can we do to better prepare ourselves to respond to aviation crisis?
Thanks, Des. I think it's really important that I point out that I have the least, I think we can amount it to 0 aviation experience up here. So I'm really delighted to be part of this panel, but my expertise comes from my work with FarmSafe, which is really about being an organisation that wants to bridge the gap between the regulators who tell us what we need to comply with, whose experience in looking at incidents tells us what's going wrong, and then talking to farmers, to you guys, and saying what works on farm, what's happening, where do we need to support the building of a stronger culture of safety. When it comes to dealing with any safety issue, whether it's aviation, whether it's your side-by-sides, your livestock handling, we talk a lot about preparation and doing your risk assessment. And in this instance, I would be encouraging everyone to be thinking, if aviation is a big part of my business, so whether that's mustering, or I'm also from Tasmania, so if I'm looking a little bit sweaty up here, it's just because I'm still acclimatising. We tend to only use pilots when we're doing either fertiliser application or chemicals. But it's having that conversation about what does an emergency plan look like. So doing your planning really well, if aviation's a big part of your operation, doing that emergency plan, or even a small part, I should say, doing your emergency planning really well, doing it in consultation with your team. So if it's a contractor pilot or a pilot who's part of your business, consulting with them, talking to them, also talking to other members of the team about what that emergency plan looks like, embedding it in your business so everyone knows what it looks like, and then reviewing it. Now, definitely reviewing it in the case of an incident or a near miss. So it might be that no one actually got hurt, but you come in at the end of the day and you think, whoa, we got a bit of a close one. That is a really great opportunity to stop and think, well, hang on a minute, do we have all the plans in place that we need to have in place should that have turned into a catastrophic incident? And then in the event of an incident, it's that follow-up, the review, what modifications need to be made, and it's supporting those people who've been impacted by it. So making sure we're really stepping up and providing everyone who is impacted either immediately, or there's that knock-on effect. We know how tight the agricultural community is. Incidents tend to reverberate right through whole communities. Making sure everyone gets the support they need to address that.
Thank you. Now let's shift to technology, Craig. What current technologies can we use to enhance aviation safety, and why is it so important to keep our technology up to date and functional?
Yeah, thanks, Des. Look, there's a lot of new technology coming out, and from a regulatory perspective, the technology moves faster than we can move the regulation to incorporate into what you want to do. Drones is a big one. Whether we can apply it and how quickly we can apply it to things like mustering will be determined by the technology and how it rolls out. The machines themselves, I don't think at the moment are at a point where they could match someone in an R22 who is as much a cattleman as they are a pilot. That's a big part of it. Whether AI will be able to overcome that eventually and be able to predict cattle movement, etc., there's people in the audience who know a lot more about it than I do. So anytime we can put an unmanned aircraft into a hazard-rich environment, and I'm stating the obvious to a lot of people in the room, that mustering is a hazard-rich environment when it comes to aviation, anytime we can take that person out of that link and put in something that's more remote, that's a plus from a safety perspective. Of course, there's other issues that go along with that as well. It's not so pleasant that we may put those people out of business, etc., etc. But from a pure safety perspective, technology in the form of RPAS will probably be incorporated more and more as we move on. The other thing from a safety perspective, we get some really good data from the ATSB and Angus's team, is that some of the incidents that we've seen both in the mustering itself, the operation itself, and the associated operations of moving the aircraft to the mustering place or recovering back to the accommodation in the afternoon, we've seen some incidents happen there where, had we been able to get to those people a little bit quicker because of the remoteness of the areas, we may have saved some lives. So any of the technology that involves live tracking of aircraft, like spider track and things like that, where the operator of the aircraft can actually see where you are at any one point in time, and in some cases, G meters on the aircraft can initiate distress signals that go via satellite back to the main area, we can get to those people quicker. So if you're able to incorporate any technology into your aircraft that can live track it and monitor it, that could help save lives in those arenas as well. Yeah, so they're the big sort of technology things that I've seen coming up.
Thank you. Angus, from your perspective at the ATSB, what role does technology play when it comes to responding to aviation emergency, and how the use of technology intersects with the local knowledge, especially in remote areas?
Yeah, I guess it's twofold. It's exactly what was just said there around some of that technology. We look not only around what contributed to an accident, but what the outcome was. And sometimes the outcome could have been a survivable outcome had it been for a number of things. Now, sometimes it's getting to the crash site in a timely manner, and we've certainly seen that here in the Northern Territory. Things like PLBs, personal locator devices, etc. Those can become very important, and you only have to read some of our reports from accidents that have occurred up here in the last 2 years to know that there was a significant delay between the accident happening and people even knowing that something had gone wrong, let alone then going finding them. We also see now, and I guess to benefit us, there's a lot more. Robinson now in their R44s or R66s are having in-cab cameras there. We recreate a lot of accident conditions by what we can get from those cameras, and we had an R66 rollover down near Newcastle last year. The information we gather there will have international ramifications on having the fin stabilisers on the Robinson, for instance. So that doesn't help prevent the accident, but it helps prevent future accidents. So that sort of technology is important for us to recreate the situation or the circumstances of a crash, so that we can then put learnings in place to lessen the likelihood in the future. But there are also those other things, engine monitoring devices, etc., to make sure that what I mentioned before around maintenance is very much being actively monitored, not simply just in line with what the mandatory requirements may be. Mandatory requirements are there to give you a guideline. They're not, and they're the minimum. They're certainly not the maximum, I guess, approach you should take to when it comes to safety. You should be looking at all of the things that can make you safer, not simply the things that the regulator are going to come knocking on your door.
Yeah, thank you. A tricky topic that is often challenging in many aspects of our industry is fatigue. Craig, we know mental and physical fatigue plays a significant role in aviation safety. How does fatigue impact aviation, and how can we collaborate as an industry to manage it more effectively?
Yeah, it's a huge impact. To state basically, fatigue has a huge impact on aviation. If you think, and mustering pilots in the room will know, the cognitive processes you're using to fly your R22, R44, whatever you happen to be flying, in the environment that we fly in when we're mustering is top level. You are using the most advanced cognitive processes that our amazing brains can accommodate. Fatigue quickly takes those away. And there's a whole set of legislation that CAS has produced. It's based on world research, human studies, human factors, etc., that dictate very clearly how long a pilot can operate for on a duty sort of period before they're required to get a rest. It even goes so far as to tell how long they have to rest for before their next duty period, how many duty periods they can do in a row, etc. So it's Civil Aviation Order 48.1, and the pilots and operators in the room will be familiar with it. It's extremely complex because as organisms, we are extremely complex. So if you're in any doubt that fatigue has an adverse effect on aviation safety, please don't have any doubt. It does. The trouble we have, and organisations like the ATSB have, when there's an accident or incident, it's very hard to attribute fatigue as a causal factor from a percentage point of view. We may know the pilots were fatigued due to rosters, etc., but we just can't say for certain, Did that result in the accident, or was it a contributing factor? And if so, by how much? So when you're looking at your crews with respect to mustering, you need to really think from when they get up in the morning to when they go to bed at night, how long they're in heavy duty sort of periods while they're during the work day there, when they're working hard, what rest facilities do they have, because it is a huge factor. And in the environment that you work in, not only the flying environment, but the physical environment with respect to temperatures, dust, etc., can be extremely fatiguing. So look after your crews, give them good rest opportunities in good rest facilities, and that will have quite a dramatic effect on safety. One thing, Des, if I may, we've got a sector risk profile here that we did 10 years ago. For those who want a bit more information, we sat down with the musterers and we asked them, you know, what are the biggest risks in your sector of the industry? So we've listed them here. Fatigue is definitely one of them. And the good thing about this document, it gives you mitigation strategies on all the various risks, including fatigue, that are in the industry. So I've got a few copies of those. If you want one, just come and see us after the presentation.
Thank you for that, Craig. Felicity, understand that a fatigue management code is currently being drafted. Can you tell us more about that and how it can help manage fatigue in the industry and improve aviation safety?
Thanks. Yeah, we're actually not only looking at fatigue, but we're really quite excited at FarmSafe. Our fantastic executive officer, Stevie, is working closely with CASA and with others, including NTCA, to try and build a guide that will support safety and build a greater understanding of the kind of safety measures we, as pastoralists, need to have in place. Can I just query in the room, how many people would use a contractor for any aviation work on their property? Contractors? As opposed to having a pilot on staff? So there's a lot of people dealing with the contractor relationship is an overlay for a lot of people. See, I find that in itself is really interesting. So when we talk about fatigue management, but we are now stepping back into, now I'm dealing with fatigue management in someone who's not actually my direct employee, that's something that FarmSafe's really alert to and is going to be a big part of the work that we develop, because what we want is a guide that supports people, whether they're dealing with that close employee-employer relationship or whether they're actually having to say, I've got a contractor coming in. For me, in the north of Tasmania, I've only got one contractor I can use, so I can't afford to piss him off, or I will not get my spraying done. So it's a bit tricky to start pushing and saying, well, these are certain expectations I have on the property. So that's where I hope FarmSafe is really alert to what the actual challenges look like if you're trying to manage fatigue in someone who you don't actually directly employ. But through our consultation with farmers, with others, I'm hoping that we can actually come to something that is a really practical tool. If you have strong views about this though, please can you hunt Stevie or myself down? Stevie, can you just wave your arm? She's Canadian, you'll find her. Because we do really want to hear from people about what works, what are the biggest challenges, and how do we build a guide that you can actually practically use on your own property.
Thank you. Angus, when it comes to aviation incidents, what should a station's emergency response plan include to ensure a quick and effective response? What kind of information and systems are most useful when it comes to investigations, and where might liability unexpectedly fall on producers in the case of an incident?
I think when it comes to planning, you look, if you sort of take that overarching view around what are all the things that you can do to make the environment as safe as you can. And that's around having the right type of equipment in terms of always planning for what could be worst case scenario, and making sure that when that does occur, and it will occur, you will have incidents where obviously where a helicopter comes down or a light aircraft hits a wire, etc. Not being surprised, but being prepared and ready for it. But it's more, I think sometimes we look at, well, what's the regulations say? And I'll just give you a very quick story to, I guess, around not looking at are we compliant with legislation or a requirement for regulations, around are we doing everything in our best interest. So I've got a 26-year-old daughter who lives up here in Darwin. Her last job, she was flying often between Darwin and places like Ramangini and Gumbulunja, etc., and into West Arnhem Land. I never really thought too much about it. It was part of her job. She texted me one day when I was at work, and she showed me the flight plan, and she was in the plane at the time. She was a passenger in the plane, and she said, "Does this look right to you?" And they'd been circling around for some time. She said, "The pilot seems stressed and not talking to me. What's happening?" And I had a look at it, and I thought, well, it doesn't look right. Walked in next door to one of my pilots who'd done some work up here, and I said, "What's going on?" And he picked it straight away. He said, "Look, I think what's happened is that they've got some issue with the landing gear. I bet he's trying to troubleshoot it. The next thing, another plane will turn up underneath them, I'm betting, and have a look." And that's exactly what happened. So the pilot got hold of his boss, got up in another plane, had a look. They ended up diverting to a bigger airfield where there was some emergency services and landed, and it was all good. But I suddenly thought then, it really brought home to me, I'm putting the life of my daughter in the hands of a pilot who was younger than her. He was, I think, about 22. And that operation, I hope they're not approaching this by, are we just compliant with legislation or with WHS guidelines? Are we doing everything in our power to understand what are the risks involved and what have we got in place to make sure those risks don't then materialise into a catastrophic incident? And I would urge all of you, whether you're contracting pilots onto your places or you've got your own pilots, it's not around, you don't now outsource the accountability or all of the risk to that contracted aviation entity who are experts at it, but what can you do? And some of it goes to what can you have in place in the event of an incident? What are the sorts of things that you may be changing on your property that they're not aware of? And that could be power lines, that could be understanding. We've had a couple of trees grow over one season to another. If you've had a drought period and then suddenly no one's been spraying there for 2 years and you get the same pilot back, it may look very different. There are things that you will know in your own profiles and your own places that the aviation company may not know, and your responsibility is to, well, what can I do? And we just heard about sleeping quarters, around meals, all those sorts of things that aid in making the whole environment safer, because it's not around just being compliant, it's around how do you make sure that everyone gets home safely at the end of the day.
Yeah, thank you. Last question, Felicity. Can you talk about the responsibility that sits with the broader industry in ensuring aviation practices are safe? How does industry as a whole ensure safety beyond just individual stations?
Oh, you're a piece of cake. You don't mind if we run over a bit, do you? I actually think what you just said, Angus, is really what FarmSafe certainly believes it's all about, and that is it's a culture. Because no matter what I look at in farm safety, no one's going to be looking at you over your shoulder all the time anyway. A regulator's not going to come and check who's wearing a seatbelt in a side-by-side vehicle on my farm in Tasmania, and that's a hell of a lot smaller than what most of you are dealing with up here. So, to me, it's building that culture that is going to keep us safer. If we're doing it because we're thinking more carefully about how do we shape safety on our individual properties, in our farming communities, so that it is not only what we're doing when things are good, when the cattle are fat, when the interest rates are down, when the values are up, but we're doing it when we're looking at a drought, when we're looking at cyclone, for example, or all sorts of different catastrophes that are thrown at farmers all the time. Because that is when we seem to see things get thrown out the door, and whether it's, as you said earlier, it's no longer servicing the equipment when it needs to be serviced, or it's not doing the emergency planning. It's really easy to give up on that stuff when you're thinking, I really need to make sure I pay the interest bill at the end of this month. But we need to, because if you add into your drought scenario the death of a family member or a colleague, you've just added to that catastrophe 100-fold. So if we can embed that in the way we do things, I think we will move to a much safer farming environment, whether you're up here or whether you're down in Tasmania. And that's ultimately, I think, our goal.
Yeah, 100%. Alrighty, that's the last of our questions. Just to finish off, it's crucial that we understand the support available to us at every level, aviation safety. It is vital that we tap into the resources and move forward as an industry to ensure we are all doing the best we can to ensure the safety of those around us. But the key takeaway from today's discussion is simple. Aviation safety is shared responsibility. We all have a role making sure we get our family and mates home safely at the end of each workday. I want to extend a huge thank you to our panellists, Craig, Angus and Felicity, sorry. I'm nearly there. For their time and invaluable insights today. They will be all making themselves available at the NTCA trade stand after this panel, so I encourage you to take the opportunity to engage with them further. And of course, thank you to everyone here for joining us in this important discussion. Together we can make a real difference improving aviation safety within the Northern Pastoral industry. Thank you.